All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second masterclass series session, all about building a team. If you've joined us before for our informational sessions, I do a quick hello. I'm going to turn it over to Jen here in just a moment, who's going to let you know all about the MCDA and all the wonderful things we do and invite you to join. And then Jen is going to toss it over to Rob, who is going to facilitate our class today and talk about his project and how he built a team and how it can be effective for other projects as well. All right, Jen, take it away.
So good morning, folks. It's good to see you here. For those of you who don't know, the Maine Community Development Association's purpose is to provide forums and increase awareness and foster communication relating to community development issues and concerns. And we also provide, try to provide education and training through workshops. So we're glad that you're joining us here. If you are not a member of MCDA, it's not difficult to join. It's open to for-profit, nonprofit agencies, whoever would be interested. So you can either reach out to me or Kristen, or just go to maincda.org. So Rob,
Sure.
take it away.
So my name is Rob Nelson. I am the developer of the housing project in Newcastle called 16 Mills Road, Newcastle, which is pretty descriptive of where it's located. And this is a project that is funded by Maine Housing through the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program. Brief background, most of my background is as a mechanical engineer. Most of my career was in solar energy research and analysis. I got interested in the green building world and then got interested in figuring out who actually makes projects happen, and that would be a developer. So that led me into that path, which then we've lived in Newcastle for about 20 years. That interest in development led me to volunteer with the town in town planning efforts. And all that sort of, I guess, led me to this project. So I wanted to talk about, I understand the idea is to sort of learn about who should be involved in a team. And I kind of broke a project into three pieces. One, the first piece would be the sort of project conception, like what is it you're trying to do? The second is the actual project planning. Once you've got an idea of what you're trying to do, how you make that happen. And the third is the actual construction and execution of the project. So as I talk about those, I'll talk about sort of who would be involved. So the project conception really is, what are you trying to do? And obviously in this discussion, we're really talking about housing. So the question is, are you trying to do rental housing? Are you looking for ownership project? How many units? How big is the project? Are you trying to achieve affordability, or is it obviously we've all heard about the massive need for housing of all kinds. So are you looking for an affordable project, or are you looking just to have more market rate housing? As starting any project like this, having someone who has done similar projects to what you're thinking about is really helpful. And having a developer perspective involved early is really important, because you can't separate, the goals of the projects with the financial achievability of the project. So I think it's really important to have someone who can sort of, have an understanding of whether you're on a path that's achievable is really important. Once you sort of have an idea of what you're trying to do, the next thing is the project site. Do you already control it? Is it something that's owned? If you're a town, does the town own it? Have you identified a site if it's not already controlled? If you're looking for a site, then what are the characteristics you're looking for? And there, clearly, you need to work with someone involved in real estate to understand what options are out there. And that, of course, feeds into the finances of the project as well. If your project has to purchase land, then that obviously is going to have a big impact on the budget. again, the finances, again, even at this very early stage, um, with an understanding of what you're trying to do, where's the money going to come from? I mean, you may not have this nailed down at this point, but having an idea of how a project might get financed can make it more than just an intellectual exercise. To have a sense that, okay, here are these programs that we think that we could design a project that meets the requirements of this program, so this program might be able to fund our project. Or we understand what the market is, again, working with if it's a market rate effort, working with local real estate agents to understand where the market is and what target price you might have if it's a for sale project. We'll again give you a sense of, okay, we have this idea and we actually have a way to make the finances work so we can actually execute the project. And then, again, we're still in the conception stage, but sort of look at if you've now identified a site, look at the site conditions. What could actually fit there. Again, this is before we're not hiring engineers at this point. So this project conception stage is really about sort of broad sense. You're not spending a lot of money at this point. You're just doing a little bit of analysis. Look at site conditions, have an understanding of the zoning. Can a project work on this location? And then if you are looking at, again, back to the finances, do we have a sense of how we could fund this? If you're looking at affordability, I looked through your history and I saw that you had John Egan of the Genesis Community Loan Fund talk to you about affordable funding sources. Genesis provides technical assistance to developers who are looking to work with Maine Housing. And so they're a great resource to say, okay, here's some sources you might be able to identify. So again, at this stage, now that you sort of have a sense of where you might want to go, talking with someone like John is really helpful. So then you can sort of have okay, is this project, look like it can work? And hopefully the answer is yes. And then we would go on to the next stage of actually starting to plan out a project. And here, obviously, now you're going to be spending money. You're going to be hiring professionals. And so the stakes obviously get higher. You may end up not being able to execute the project, but you really need to actually design the project and pull that team together, and you're going to need to start spending money. And again, I think a key piece of this team is a developer. I think having gotten through this project is by the largest project I've done, by the way, and my first housing project. And you really need someone who understands the whole picture and a lot of the details, and sort of can get in the weeds, but also really sees how all the pieces fit together. So having someone with that mindset is really critical to making sure that all the pieces get covered. And if you're a public entity, how are you going to select a developer? That whether you're going to do an RFP or whatever, I can't speak directly to that, but I think that's going to be a big piece of figuring out, who is going to be the lead on the project. The next piece would be, again, even we're in the planning stage, we're not building yet, but identifying a general contractor or construction manager. I think as you're planning the project, you really want someone who understands how the project is going to go together, involved early in the project, because there are lots of things that look good on paper, but when you're actually trying to execute, end up costing money or just making things more complicated. So you really want to have, again, a general contractor or construction manager involved early in the process. It's worth thinking at this stage about sort of how you're going to build. The Mills Road project uses modular construction, and I think there are a lot of benefits to modular. There's some challenges, absolutely, but I think thinking about whether that's a path you might want to take early on, I think can be helpful to um, designing the actual project. And that could involve having a modular dealer as part of your team to start to think about what is possible. And then, of course, now we're on the site. Obviously, you'll want to have the site surveyed. You need site designer. You'll have a civil engineer involved with both circulation on the site and dealing with runoff and groundwater. Those can be challenging on sites. And then you figuring out what you're going to build. You're building, having an architect involved. Again, if you're working with a modular dealer, they may have some designs already created that may or may not work, may need to be modified. But yeah, that team of the, led by the developer, construction manager or general contractor, which essentially are the same role, but who is going to be responsible for the construction, figuring out how you're going to how you might build these, and you may not have these answers completely figured out at this beginning stage of the project planning, but by the end of that, you really want to have plans in place, and then figuring out the site, how you're going to lay out the buildings on the site, how that meets the zoning, how you're going to interact with the neighbors. All those things will be a key piece. And now I think we'll get again at finances. Now that the project's becoming more real, we really need to figure out how it's going to get financed. If you're looking for affordability, you can't do it without public funds. And I know most municipalities do not have the funds to make things happen on their own. So you're really going to be trying to identify funding sources. And again, someone like John at Genesis is critical to help you identify funding sources. Those funding sources, of course, have rules involved. They have deadlines, timetables for proposals. As an aside, the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program that funded my project was a roughly annual process that they put out an RFP, and then there was a deadline for proposals to be submitted. Took them, the Maine Housing, a number of months to review all those proposals and then make awards. And at the time, I think it was roughly half the projects got funded or something on that order of magnitude. And so as part of the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program, there were a number of criteria. The size of the project, it's between 6 and 18 units. It needs to meet the 80% AMI rules, and so on and so forth. But if you're looking to get funding from a program like that, which that program doesn't currently have funding going forward. I know that there are a number of funding sources being identified and investigated. But if you're looking to go for a program like that, you need to make sure the project you're proposing meets the requirements of those programs, and that you're gonna look good to the program. For another example, in that Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program, there were the criteria for judging proposals put a lot of weight on project readiness. So having all your permits, all your designs completed, your permits in place, all those things were critical to having a project that would get funded. And I think that kind of thing is probably going to be true of many programs, that the more credible you are, that you have done all the design and project planning work, will make you more fundable. There may end up being a delay between when you do all that planning and when you've identified the funding and actually achieve it. But I think you're in a much better position to have that in place than to say, hey, we've got this idea of a project, will you fund us? And then halfway through that process, you run into a roadblock, whether it's a zoning issue or something else. Having all that figured out ahead of time, I think makes you more credible, even if it's commercial financing, to be honest. I think the more work you can do before I mean, obviously you want to identify your funding source, But before you're actually going for approval, I think the more work you can do, the more attractive the project works. Um, and then another piece of that, which obviously it ties in, is permitting. Obviously, you'll need permits from the municipality. You'll need zoning permits. You may need a subdivision permit. I know that the state rules around subdivision have been changing, but depending on the structure of the project and how you're subdividing land, you may still need a subdivision permit. Then you'll need building permits. So working with the town is critical. Even early on, as I mentioned in the first stage of project conception, talking with the town about what you're thinking about doing and what the town wants to see. If you're not the town, if you're another entity, is really critical. And I'll do a little aside here. In Newcastle, we've been doing a lot of planning for many years. Over the last roughly decade, we identified that our old zoning code really wasn't working for the town. So we decided to update both our comprehensive plan and zoning code in one big effort, and it was a massive effort. It was the largest planning process in the history of the town, and it was painful. It took a lot of work, but we ended up with a zoning code that really does work for the town. It's been very effective at allowing projects that meet the needs of the town and meet the goals of the code and the comp plan. Absolutely, it was a lot of work. My project on Mills Road would not have been permitted, would not have been able to be permitted under the old code. But it was a very straightforward process under the new code. So it really fits the town well. And again, that code really worked for the town. So I would encourage other towns that haven't been through the process that we have, steal our code, look at it, look at the ideas. I think a lot of the ideas, the idea of the code is it's very modular. So even if your town has different characteristics, you can take pieces of it that fit those portions of your town. I very strongly encourage towns to get ahead of a project, the kinds of projects that you want to see in your town. Make sure that they are achievable. Zoning codes don't make projects happen, but they enable projects. So if you can look at your code, look at the parts of your town where you think housing in particular really belongs, and make sure that the kinds of projects you'd like to see are possible. Back to the process. Obviously, as a development project, you have to work with the code as it is. So as you're designing the project, you need to make sure that the project fits with the zoning. You may also need permits, for example, from Maine DOT if the project is located on a state highway. As Mills Road is actually a state road in Newcastle. So I needed to get an entrance permit from Maine DOT. I needed to get a stormwater permit. So you want to make sure that in addition to the municipality, if there are any other entities that you need permits from, you want to get ahead of that and make sure that you don't get caught out at the end, that you've missed something. Utilities are also can seem straightforward, but may not be. Hopefully, I mean, one of the goals, one of the real reasons I've always thought that housing belonged on the site on Mills Road was that it's on town sewer and water. We say town, but it's a quasi-municipal agency, the Great Salt Bay Sanitary District. And so in conceiving a project, you need to make sure that the sewer system has capacity, that they will allow you to connect, that you have a path to get water to the site, and also utilities, so that you have a good path to get power onto the site. In Newcastle, getting power across the street was not trivial. Seems like it should be, but again, these are things you want to start to think about early in the process, just to make sure that you don't get caught by something that is unexpectedly complicated. And so that's really the sort of the planning process. At the end of that, you would hopefully have a set of a site plan, building plans, and a real sense of a budget. Obviously a piece of that that ties into having plans are working with that general contractor or construction manager. At this stage, at least, having a pretty good sense of cost that you may or may not, depending on sort of the process you're going for financing, whether you have actual bids from contractors at this stage, would depend sort of on the timetable, because if you get bids too far out, they're really not going to be good a year later. But you can have a pretty good sense of what your budget is, how much financing you need at the end of that process. So you'll have plans, budgets, and if you're going to be putting a proposal into a funding source, you'll have all the pieces that you need at that point. Then you're assuming you get financing, then you're looking at construction. And again, having that general contractor, construction manager to put all the pieces together and to be responsible. It's really key to have a contractor who you're comfortable with, who is familiar with the type of project that you're trying to do, and that you can trust and have a good relationship with. I think those are very critical to making the whole project run smoothly. Again, if you're looking at some kind of offsite construction, whether it's modular or panelized, having both the general contractor who's familiar with those, and also any particular expertise in those to add to the project team could be critical. And then, of course, you have a slew of subcontractors that would include, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roof contractors. Could be flooring. Obviously a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. And given the scale of the project, whether those are local contractors or whether you need a larger team, a larger contractor who has a bigger team, it's great working with local contractors and small contractors, but often, if it's just one or two guys, that has a schedule impact that, it just takes them longer to get the work done. Again, it's great being able to hire the small guys, and we've done a lot of that in Newcastle, but I do realize that can have schedule impact, and that can be frustrating at times. Just the speed with which things get done often depends on how many bodies are on site. That construction management piece and the general contractor, you really need to have both off-site coordination, someone who's running the schedule, thinking about sequencing people. You also need on-site supervision. So someone who is going to be, if not on site all the time, again, depending on the scale of the project, you really need someone who understands the details. As subcontractors have questions, they can answer them. They can, if two subcontractors are trying to do the same thing at the same time, they can sort of coordinate how to get people out of each other's way. But you really need some engaged on-site supervision. And then the other piece that's a lot of it's at the development's end of things is the project financing, sort of bookkeeping. If you're getting funding from a public entity, there's a requisition process of documenting what you're spending, submitting invoices, then receiving the funds and distributing them as needed. That's a non-trivial piece of the project finances, is keeping track of all that. And then, at the end of the project, you really need to keep track of all your final permit approvals, making sure that you've, again, documented that everything's been done. If you're closing out a loan with a public entity or a commercial financer, they're going to want to see those final permits and things like that. And if you were doing a construction loan, now you're in the process of going for your permanent financing and closing out the construction loan. So that's a quick sort of version of how I see the project going, having almost finished the one I'm on now. It's been many learning curves and quite a process, but I think this stuff's all achievable. And again, without programs like the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program and the town having put good zoning in place, this project wouldn't exist. So with that, I am open to questions. If I left any glaring gaps in the process, please point them out to me. But otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So I'm going to unmute everybody. Bear with me just a moment. Allow me, Mike. There we go. Um, okay, so I have a question. I know that you referenced the zoning changes and the town ordinances that were changed. What were they dramatic changes? Where did it transition from and then to?
Yeah, so they were dramatic. I mean, our old code was many years old. It had been fiddled with and modified in such that pieces were inconsistent. The language was awful because it had been edited 30 times. But the goal really was to start from scratch. So again, we actually hired. So a little bit of backstory. So I've been again lived in Newcastle about 20 years. When we moved to town, there was a Walmart proposed in Damascata, and the aftermath of that got a lot of people thinking about, what kind of, we don't want that, but what kind of development do we want? There was a big planning effort in Damascata that ended up really not going anywhere. And I think that kind of inspired us in Newcastle a little while later to say, okay, we really want to start from the beginning. So we did, as I mentioned, a big planning effort to update our comprehensive plan. And from that comprehensive plan, wrote a new code. We hired consultants. And full disclosure, one of the planners we hired was Kara Wilbur, who has since gone on to do development and modular development. And she was one of the partners in the Maine Rural Affordable Rental Housing project in Madison that my project in Newcastle was very much modeled after. And I've been working with Kara and her team to execute my project. So again, that trust thing, I've known Kara for many years, and that helped me in doing a project like this that was beyond anything I'd done previously. So get back to the team, having people that you have some sense of and can trust and understand what they're trying to do is crucial. But back to the planning. So we hired the planners. We then created a code which was very much based on the form-based code ideas. And the first version of that did not pass the town. There was an opposition that, frankly, I think didn't really understand it and was afraid of the changes. We ended up, a group of us went back and heavily edited that version and created a version that did pass, but it still has a lot of the goals of the code are about shape and the relationship of buildings to the public way. So it's still formish based, but it was a totally new code. And we really looked at identifying different districts in town and thinking about that sort of form idea of the range of in the middle of town, we have the most dense development. And as we move out into more rural areas, we have gradations of how much development we're trying to encourage. Again, and those zones were based on where we have utilities and where we don't. So it really was a sort of a ground up rethinking of what you could do. In some places, the net difference in what you could build wasn't radical, but the organization was totally different.
Thank you so much for that. Um, let's see, do we have any other questions? Because I'm full of questions always. I guess while we're waiting for some more questions, I see that we've dropped some links into the chat there. Jen and Kevin have dropped some links, as well as myself with Maine Housing. I know Jen dropped in the information on the Newcastle project, on the 16 Mills project there. We've also dropped a worksheet to help you organize and identify parts of your team to see if we have anybody missing. Oh, awesome, Kevin. Thank you so much for that. Looks like you shared our Newcastle's zoning codes.
Yep.
Okay. What now was that? I mean, was it how much pushback did you get from that? I mean, I know we just kind of went over the dramatic changes, but
so in that first version, we had some people who were very much opposed. I mean, I think in that first version, we had still some standards on buildings in the rural area, and that we ended up, the version that we ended up passing, we took most of the standards off the rural parts of town. I mean, one of the challenges I think of the form-based ideas is I think there is applicability in rural areas, but there's huge resistance. And so I think that was really the key, I think the key piece that we modified. We also simplified it dramatically. And I think actually many of those simplifications made it more effective for the whole town. But the rural piece was the real challenge in, understanding the opposition and allowing it to pass.
mm-hmm.
May I add a couple of comments?
Yeah.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning.
Well said on everything. I wanted to just add to the zoning stuff. So I wasn't here. I wasn't the manager here when all of this played out. So Rob has a better understanding of that. But as somebody who came in and started reading that code and recognizing its strengths, I would advocate for any town to reconsider form-based approach, or at least a cheat sheet. So if you look at that link and you look at, like, I think it's page 11 and 12 and beyond that, it's 2 pages basically in matrices explaining exactly what you can do with your property. So a lot of times when people come into our office now, we can just point them to the 2 pages that they really need to take a look at to determine what they can do with their property. And it's less based on what you can use it for and more based on how far your setbacks are. And they're really, I want to use maybe the word forward thinking. Like, how do you mirror what the town already looks like with how you want your zoning to look like? And a lot of the time, zoning was put in place in the 80s in Maine, especially, and just sort of cookie cutter across the country. And the zoning didn't match what the land already looked like, what the buildings looked like, how close they were to the road. So some of the changes that allowed Rob's project to go forward included things like there are no parking minimums. So he, as the developer, gets to decide how many parking spaces he wants to have on his property. He has 16 units. I don't think he has 16 parking spaces there, but
no, I do.
You do? Wow. You don't have 32.
No, and I'm personally I'm really fascinated. I'm going to be very fascinated to see some in my project, met the requirements of the new code, and just to be clear, the code was in place for years before I imagined doing this project. So there wasn't overlap, but some of the neighbors have been very resistant to the project, thinking that the neighborhood is going to be inundated with cars. I really do not think that's going to be the case, but I'm going to be fascinated to see how many cars. One of the goals of the project being, it's just around the town from around the corner from Main Street, and then if you're familiar with Newcastle and Damascotta, it's a few hundred yards beyond to downtown Damascotta. I really think that someone could live in this project and not have a car.
Yeah.
We put laundry facilities in one of the basements, so and so that people wouldn't have to be lugging laundry somewhere else. So the parking thing, I really don't think is going to be a problem. If it is, we'll figure something out. But I'm fascinated to see how it plays out.
Well, every other town I managed that has had parking maximums or no requirements on parking, you find that you still are able to rent properties even if somebody doesn't need a car. Many of the projects end up with only half of the units needing parking or 2/3 of the units needing parking. So I am curious to see how that plays out too. But the other zoning thing I just wanted to mention is proximity to the road. So a lot of the buildings on that street are already pretty close to the street, and you want to keep that building front consistent. So with the zoning changes, now this project mirrors that and actually matches the neighborhood. Little bigger
Yeah,
buildings, but they match
yeah.
the neighborhood.
But actually not again, the massing of each building is not that much different than there are some houses along that stretch that are comparable height, comparable width.
Yep.
So again, a goal of this project and a goal of the Kara, as I mentioned, Kara Wilbur and Dooryard have developed these modular building types. And the goal really is to fit into these neighborhoods in Maine with a building that is going to look like it's always been there. I've said from the beginning of the project, my goal 6 months from now is that people drive by and just assume it's always been there. One of the great things about this site is there's a line of mature trees right along the street that are, beautiful big old trees that really define the site. And so I really think the buildings are going to just look like they've always been there. And that's actually been one of the challenges with the code. The code actually has a maximum front setback in that district because we really wanted buildings to be pulled up to the street the way they had been traditionally. And in this case, there's a little bit of a trade-off in how much you're stressing those trees. But again, I think the way it's come out, it looks great.
So I see we have somebody typing. While they're typing, I'm going to ask another question about the team itself, but this is kind of like a general to the room.
Sure.
Like I recognize some of the names in here. And by the way, your videos can turn on if you guys want to show us your wonderful early morning smiles today. So for those who are attending, how many of you are currently in the process of pulling together a team to move forward with some sort of development? And for those of you who are, who was your first go-to in pulling that team together? And there may be no hands, there may be no people who are pulling it together. Daryl, you're in the process? You're muted. Oh,
Like clear now?
yep, we've got you now.
Sorry about that. I couldn't get you on my laptop for some reason. It wouldn't let me click on, so I had to actually put this masterclass on my cell phone. So little disconnect because I'm scrolling around with my mouse. Yeah, I've got some interesting housing projects that since I work as a community development consultant, I'm kind of the point person that puts teams together anyway. So sometimes it may be a project where we have the municipality entrust me to sort of put the team together, and we look at the risk factor, and a lot of times we try to get the developer to be the primary regarding any of the risks. And then people get impatient, not in my backyard type of thing when you're doing housing projects. So I've been pretty lucky with the menu that I have. For example, in one of the towns, Oxford, they have a 40-acre site that could be commercial residential the town owns, and it's got TIF and it's got sewer and water, it's got all the great amenities, but they sort of went back and forth for a whole year. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to list it with a local realtor, we're going to do this, and we're going to have that new supermarket there, we're going to have workforce housing. So I've been actually put that together to put a team together to get this project off the ground. And you need that little glitzy marketing one-page factoid that's going to be the lure that gets it together. But I've already worked with all the zoning issues, and we have Rob. So this is going to be a 6 to put something together with that, and we could sub this 40-acre parcel. So we're putting some creative to.
Daryl, you're breaking up a little bit for us there. We're missing some of the end conversation there.
That. So yeah, so right now we're at the stage of getting the primary developer to take hold of this project, and I'm interviewing 2 different developers coming up between now and the Labor. I still muted or broken up, or?
You're pretty broken up, Daryl.
Yeah, I just, for some reason, there's a bad connection today. But I will follow up on these things because I've got 3 different housing projects right now.
Oh, busy over there, Daryl. So let's go over to the chat. So we've got Jim. How are you managing energy, heat, cooling, air handling, appliances? How did you handle that, Rob, in your project?
One of the requirements of the rural affordable rental housing program is that everything is electric. Again, that's when you're thinking about a project, thinking about your funding sources, and if they've got any requirements, to have that as part of your project planning can be critical. So the heat and cooling are with heat pumps, each individual unit. Again, so this project is 2 8-unit, 1-bedroom apartment buildings, and so each unit has its own has 2 heat pump wall heads and 1 outdoor compressor. The water heating is with a heat pump water heater, also with an external compressor, so you're not sucking heat out of the basement. And then the appliances are all electric, and we did, in this project, I did have them install HRVs, ventilators in each building. That was, I think, very challenging for the factory. So going forward, I'm not sure what the best way to do fresh air in the buildings will be, but it was a challenging installation, but that's what we did for Newcastle.
Awesome. So looking back, you said this was your first major housing project?
Well, it's my first housing. I've done some small commercial development, but this is my first housing project, my first affordable project. So yeah, lots of new pieces.
So do you plan on doing some more? And what lessons did you learn from this first project that will help you in the future?
Sure. So I may or may not be the lead developer on future ones. I am working with Kara and her team at Dooryard they have a number of subsequent projects, again, using essentially the same building. I mean, one of the goals of this process has been to develop these building types, these 8-unit, or some have 10 units with an addition on the back, to really hone the design. Make sure that the factory is doing all their pieces properly, figuring out which pieces really should happen in the factory. Some of the things, like in our case, the flooring was installed on site, and it's hardwood floors, finished on site. That's really challenging schedule-wise, having someone come in and not only the time to install the floors, but particularly the sanding and finishing of the floors. It's messy. It means other people can't be in the buildings when you're trying to get everything done at the end of the project. So there have been a number of, small or large things like that, like, okay, sequence-wise, schedule-wise, let's not do that again. So there have been a lot of things like that. I think getting back to we've without getting into it, we've had some contractor issues. So making sure that the contractors you work with are familiar with the type of work you're asking them to do, that you have a good working relationship with them are absolutely critical. So again, I think I definitely want to make sure that all the things that I've learned, that I can make sure that we don't make those mistakes again. I don't have a particular project that I'm going to be lead on that I've identified at this point, but I wouldn't rule it out. But I definitely want to work with Kara and her team to make sure the lessons we've learned on Newcastle get incorporated in future projects.
Excellent. Good
Yeah,
advice.
I definitely feel like I've learned too much for it to get lost.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate that you learned too much. That way you can share it with us this morning. So I hate to keep taking all the questions, but I'm just a curious person. But I actually have a question for Daryl and for Rob, and actually kind of for Kevin now that I did see his response in the chat there. So, if you guys if we're looking to find a developer, which we actually have a whole class on that on October 29th with Erin Cooper Ryder, but until she can share her knowledge, Daryl, you mentioned that you're interviewing a few developers, and Rob, you said that you were going to work with other developers in the future. What are you looking for? Is it project based? Is there like a general sense of experience or skill level that you're looking for in a developer? Or is it free for all for each project?
If I may, it's usually, do you want chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry? And the answer is yes. And so and hopefully I'm clearer now because I do have the laptop finally working.
You
And
are much better.
hopefully there's some clarity now. So the current project in Oxford, for example, we almost many of us have a sense of loyalty, like you mentioned Kara now and Madison and stuff. And so around the state, I look at other communities and other developers I work with and other projects, and I try to bring them in. And so what I'm looking at now is trying to find the right fit for the town of Oxford that's a mixed use project because they want workforce housing, attainable, not to be confused with affordable. Sometimes there's a negative positive connotation with those two items. We don't want those Section 8 people here, folks, blah, blah, blah. And so I've got a couple developers who have done some really cool projects. One did a bunch of senior projects. I know John Egan pretty well from his days when he used to be with that other entity called CEI. And so we're winding it down. So I've got two right now and figuring out which one will take most of the risk because people get restless when things take too long, whether it's the permitting process. And so when it gets down to the money, people are funny that way. Municipalities, they try to not want to put a dime into a project, but one of the things we have that's an enticement for the developers is because it's town owned on this particular parcel and we have tax increment financing, and I know the development programs at Maine State Housing, of which these developers have utilized, it's an easy win-win situation, which one of the two finalists that we're talking to now. So that's where we are with that project. In Richmond, I have another project that's a mixed use that's going to have one component, 20% of approximately 80 units with 7 or 8 buildings. They've got 3 of them constructed now. And that's almost like a pay-as-you-go type of thing with a local developer that I try to wrap around some of the resources to help out, including TIF. But we haven't done, quote, the affordable housing TIF yet for this project. But some of it is for the infrastructure issues where we need expanded sewer and water, firefighting, whatever, to accommodate additional sidewalks. So it's walking into a downtown. We have all these things in a downtown revitalization plan, for example. And so there's that one. Then we have Harrison that's trying to deal with second floor type. Their housing densities, not much in their downtown, so we're really limited there. So I usually bring the same suspects up, and I also work with site selectors when I'm trying to get companies to match up with housing. So this is where I'm at. It's sort of tackling a bunch of things and keeps everything fun and fluid and moving project forward. And I hope to have some updates later this fall, especially on the Oxford project.
Good information. Thank you.
One thing I want to mention that Daryl mentioned. So the word affordable. People do. I think there were, fortunately in Newcastle, I think only a handful of people, but who were like, who are those people who are going to be moving in there? Of the Maine housing, the rural affordable rental housing program is limited to people earning 80% of area median income. In Lincoln County, for 2024, 2025, an individual earning 80% of area median income is earning $50,000 a year. This is not low income. It's meeting that market that's just not being covered. So I think that's one of the things that people don't understand is absolutely there's a need for low income housing, but these programs are not low income, they're affordable, and affordable has that definition. So like the rent for my project is $1,480 a month. That includes utilities. It seems like a really big number to me, but I'm old, so that's what the market is. So again, I think people need to understand that these are not somebody else. These are our neighbors who just can't find a place to live. And so I think that when people oppose these projects, they just don't understand that.
You hit the nail on the head, Rob, because this hits that what we used to call LMI, the moderate piece, where some people have one or two incomes. They're trying to make things go, whether they have a family, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in a family. And that's a really underserved market, whether it's for rentals or home ownership. And so we're trying to do mixed use to sort of tackle that moderate piece, and maybe we call it attainable as opposed to the affordable, which, as you mentioned, sometimes shows that it could be low income, but the natives get restless. We try to show more like this is workforce, this is moderate, this is you and me and all of us. So we really need to figure out how we're going to tackle that. And then sometimes how do we tackle that for seniors as well, and all of those things. So I love the whole mixed use project anyway, because some of the funding mechanisms require certain percentages of units that fit certain criteria. And so there's a way to tackle this. And I'd love to follow up with you anyway and just compare notes on different projects.
Sure.
If I could jump in for just a moment, the 50,000 for a single person household is actually quite a bit above the moderate level, Daryl, for
Oh, okay.
LMI.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it fits more along, if I've got my terminology right, it fits more along that missing middle section, which
Yeah.
is where we've got a lot of folks who just cannot find housing. They can afford to pay a $1,400 rent, especially since it includes heat and all utilities, but they can't afford to find, there's nothing there for them to find. So that's kind of a really good piece. But just as a quick, I don't know if this was mentioned in the last session, Kristen, or not, but with the materials, the handouts and things that are coming through with this program, if you collect them, put together, just stick them into a binder, put them into a folder on your computer or whatever, by the end of this program, you'll have a workbook that can help to guide you through. So, just making sure that you've got, you can make the best use of the resources that we can help you to get. That's all. But there, thanks.
And you hit the right buzzwords, because this whole missing middle housing, one of the best workshops I ever attended was in New Hampshire with their housing authority, and they covered it. They had some guest speakers, and they really hit the nail on the head when you're looking at that factor, and also when you're looking at the different housing densities and the right way to go about it. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Another thing I'll just mention about the sort of the developer and the piece, I live in Newcastle. I live a half mile away from the project site. I'm absolutely going to be involved in assisting with other projects. This is my community. I want to do things in my community, and I think that's a piece that I think there are other people out there who, have a strong attachment to their community and really want to be engaged there. Might not be wanting to do a development project hours away. So how that plays into that balance of someone you can work with, someone you can trust. I think, I mean, I know that people know where I live. You know, if something goes wrong, I still live in town. I'm not planning on getting run out of town. So I think that that's a piece of the puzzle that's hard to quantify, and you know, probably not something you can legally include in any way. But I actually feel like it's an important piece of the mix of working in your own community is different than coming in as the developer to some town that you don't have a connection to.
And I want to point that out too. Like that really helps build that trust with the potential NIMBY crowd. Yeah, there were some naysayers in the community, but they also know Rob and they meet with Rob and they distract him plenty as he was trying to get this project completed. But it's important to have that relationship, or at least build that trust with those folks in order to make sure that you're reducing the risk of it failing.
Mhm. Good deal. I know the NIMBY is big. You know, we were just chatting about it a little bit in the chat there. Definitely time consuming. What happens? Well, actually, before I ask another question, if anybody else has a question, we would love to hear that. But I do want to remind everybody real quick before we lose you on October 15th. So we have a series of classes here. You can sign up for any of them. The links are embedded with every link. But on 10/15, Laura, who's actually here today, viewing, will be facilitating a class on land use. And if I'm not mistaken, there are CEUs available for people who attend that class within the codes world. And I want to remind everybody about 1029 for sure, finding a developer. So does anybody have any other questions before I ask one more?
I actually do have a question for Rob.
Oh.
So with all that you've done with 16 mills, I know you kind of talked vaguely about what you might want to do in the future. What's next for 16 mills? Are you going to work with a real estate agent or further work with the town to get people housed in your project? And what is your hope and dream that happens with this?
So I'm actually working with a property management company. It's actually Dooryard again. They're building capacity in multiple areas of doing these kinds of projects. So they have been working with a list of people who have qualified. Obviously, you need to do income qualification and things like that. So we have a number of people. I've said many times that there are a lot of things about the project I'm still worried about. Filling it up is not one. I'm confident that we're going to find tenants quickly. My goal will be, you know, within a few months to have it completely full. And as I mentioned, I'm curious about the parking. I'm really curious about the mix of tenants. I can imagine some older folks downsizing. I can imagine, you know, young individuals or couples moving in. I actually don't know what that mix is going to be, but I'm fascinated to see what it's going to turn out. I think I can imagine a couple and a baby. These are small units. I think once that baby starts moving, I think they're going to run out of space. But I think, yeah, I'm really curious to see, but I am very confident it's going to fill up quickly.
That's great to hear. Kevin, I saw you were typing in the chat. Do you want to say something before we wrap
Oh
up?
no, I was just Rob's project is a rental project. It's not a condo unit project.
Gotcha. Good deal. All right, Rob, do you have any words of wisdom before we part for the day?
Not sure. Just you know, I think back to that team. I think there are challenges in any project, and having some relationships that didn't go the way you were hoping really emphasizes to me the importance of working with people who you want to work with. One of the things I tell people is that when I do a project, I want them to do it with me again. I'm not looking to get the last penny out of everybody, but I want to have a good experience, and I want other people to have a good experience. And so I think finding people who you can have that good experience with, even when, I mean, unquestionably, a project like this has a lot of challenges. A lot of times things are frustrating. But finding a team, as Daryl said, finding people you can work with, that you've worked with in the past, that that when things get difficult, everybody's going to behave well, really makes these projects achievable and makes everyone want to do it again, so we can meet the need. I mean, the housing need is, unlimited basically at this point. So as much as we can do, it feels like a drop in the bucket, but it's a step in the right direction. So we want to keep everyone moving forward. So finding people to work with, I think, really is critical.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. We appreciate your time this morning and everybody's time coming in and participating with us here. Just a reminder, I am somewhat new to Teams, and so I'm working very hard to figure out how to get all the information out to everybody in a timely manner. And I will continue to strive to work on that. So please watch your emails for copies of the video here, and hopefully soon we'll have it on our website. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
Hope to
Thanks.
see you guys all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.